Moscow Kremlin is one of the world's greatest architectural ensembles. Within its triangular walls are buildings of government, a barracks, the old royal palaces, museums, cathedrals, and churches. The word Kremlin means fortress. Since the 12th century, it has defended the people from their enemies, a symbol of security. For the last 70 years, it has protected the leaders from their people. This crowd is drawn from every corner of Moscow towards the Kremlin to express its love for the communist leaders. Today is the official demonstration on the anniversary of the revolution. For the first time, we have gained access to film from inside one of the columns. As I'm a journalist, I asked the print workers of Pravda newspaper if we could tag along. It's a 3-hour walk from the Pravda printing house to Red Square. And halfway along, the local party officials try to keep up our enthusiasm.
Которые провозгласили 72 года тому назад. Но я верю до сих пор, поэтому я оказалась здесь, иначе бы не зашла. И еще потому, что я просто, не знаю, может быть, это сейчас кому-то покажется странным, но я еще верю в то, что нас существует коммунизм, что нас ждет хорошее.
My companions are not bothered by the fact that we are surrounded by soldiers. For many years, we have been accustomed to walking in columns behind each other. Our fathers and grandfathers marched in columns. In columns, everyone is equal. When we march in columns, we love our leaders, and we know they love us too. Maybe marching in columns is the thing we're best at. Finally, the soldiers give way to plainclothes militia and KGB agents, which means we've arrived at Red Square. What a shame the KGB looks so gloomy. But what can you do? For them, it's just another day's work. Where are our leaders? There they are. It's a pity they're such a long way off. I wonder if they notice how happy we are to see them. We've been so busy building communism, have we forgotten how beautiful the Kremlin is? the Cathedral of the Assumption is the oldest of the Kremlin's 3 cathedrals. It's now a museum, restored and maintained by experts in Russian sacred art. There's been no service here for 72 years.
I have been a curator of this cathedral and other cathedrals for more than 15 years. And I should say that all the masterpieces which are preserved in these cathedrals, they are too weak, too fragile to be used as relics, because the ritual of Russian services needs chandeliers, needs some smoke, needs some kissing icons, and I am afraid they wouldn't preserve for next generations of people, and to show which was the Russian ancient culture. I think that the churches, which are full of frescoes and icon paintings, should preserve the museum.
These images were once thought of as the face of God and his saints, but they're now reduced to sideshows in the Kremlin fairground. Roll up! Come and see the largest cannon in the world. It's never been fired. Its cannonballs are too big for it. Look! The largest bell in the world. It's never been rung. In the Kremlin, fantasy is everywhere. The New Year Children's Party. It's held in the Palace of Congresses, built for the party. The parents have to wait outside. Two hours of fantasy are over, and real life must start again.
Всех детей приведут на Соборную площадь. Пожалуйста, побыстрее проходим. Пожалуйста, всех детей приведут на Соборную площадь. Побыстрее, пожалуйста, товарищи.
Everywhere there are invisible lines that visitors may not cross. Today, the soldiers of the KGB garrison are helping the children find the right path. Don't worry, your children can't get lost. It's not allowed. The Kremlin will keep a good eye on them. Children, don't worry. Your parents already know the right path. That's the path that leads to Lenin. We stand in queues for everything, but the queue at the Lenin Mausoleum is the main queue in the country. They say it was extremely cold when Lenin died. His wife begged for him to be buried, but the Bolsheviks couldn't bear to part with him. Having banished God, they preserved Lenin in a pagan temple. His spirit does not lie quiet. Night has fallen over the country, and in this darkness, strange fairy tales are told. The clock has stopped in Lenin's apartment. Only if you're an honored guest are you granted a tour. You won't be told about the terror Lenin unleashed. Instead, you'll hear how he loved to work, how he loved to hear his sister play Beethoven. You'll be told what a devoted husband he was. Although he had no children of his own, every child knows that Lenin loves them. The corpse that loves children. In the Senate building, the guardians of these legends still walk like shadows. They act like faithful retainers in a mansion where the master is absent. Valery Ovcharenko works in the Prime Minister's press office, and he wants to show us the grandest room in the Senate building. It's called the Swerdlove Hall.
This room is used for various ritual occasions. For example, various decorations could be done here, or some important dates could be marked also. And in the past, this room was used for the government activity. But nowadays, only for important meetings of formal nature.
It's as if this hall was asleep under a spell. Who will awaken these empty rooms? Next door, in the Presidium building, the Supreme Soviet is in session. The new men in the Kremlin don't have time for fairy tales. There's a game underway. The referee has kicked off. The world's press discuss the action.
Or many less checks and control.
The conservatives are in good form, uniform. The radicals attack on the left.
должны быть лишены этих льгот, привилегий. Заработал, получил деньги, они то есть, как бы всех, допустим, демократических странах, в общем-то, в Америке, ФРГ, Италия, Франция, Швеция, где реализован самый главный принцип социализма.
Everyone's interested what team the Prime Minister will play for.
Но вот в преддверии данного доклада, с учетом, что информация все время поступала, наоборот, нас начинает критиковать, что мы слишком быстро. А что касается польского варианта,
But outside these walls, the people have lost interest in such games.
It was the day that tens of thousands of people took to the streets of Moscow to call for an end to the communist monopoly of power. But even today, there was a limit. Police sealing off Red Square and the approach to the Kremlin. Was the march unofficial? If so, why did Radio Moscow publicize it? Little is clear in Soviet politics at the moment.
Can you tell me why you are contemplating the possibility of your group separating from the Communist Party and forming a new party? Why are you doing that?
For political commentators like Jonathan Dimbleby of the BBC, it's now easier to cover politics here and to report opposing points of view like those of Yuri Afanasyev, one of the leaders of the radicals. But it's still the party that's in control. I want to talk to the one man who might be able to change all that, Boris Yeltsin. What does he think about the present image of the Kremlin?
Ну, сейчас, может быть, не так темно, может быть, какое-то просветление есть, но это никак не значит, что надо именно из Кремля осуществлять власть, так сказать, по всей стране. Пока, к сожалению, реальная политика делается в Кремле, а не народом. Мы должны подойти к тому, что реальная власть должна быть за стенами Кремля.
Are these Yeltsin's people? No, they're representatives from many different democratic groups, some more radical than him. You have to be pretty lazy these days not to criticize the government. But why don't they react? Are they deaf? The demonstrators want a dialogue with the Kremlin powers. There is a table in the Kremlin, but it's not a round one. Here, Lenin ran the firm, and so did Mr. Big, Uncle Joe, and his boys, who inherited the business. They looked at each other with a smile, without knowing whose chair would be empty tomorrow, and who had helped in the rubbing out. But there was one pair of eyes into which they dared not look.
When Stalin went from here, it was a time of horror. And those black spots on the wall, it's people buried in different times. Sometimes they killed one another. Sometimes they were executioners, and those who were executed, they were buried there. And the main killers are buried in personal graves. It's Stalin, it's Zhdanov, it's the dirtiest sometimes, but it's our history. And in the same way, you have Cromwell and Kings standing together near the Westminster. I think it's necessary to have it here, but we're still looking at this, trying to understand what it was with us, what it was in Kremlin and outside.
It's difficult to believe that these calm and beautiful buildings, once the Palace of Amusements, contained the apartment of one of the world's most terrible men. Stalin was the last leader to actually live in the Kremlin, completely sealed off from the outside world. It really was like this when Stalin died. People came from all over Moscow to take part in his funeral. Dozens were killed in the crush. That day is being recreated for the screen by the poet Yevgeny Yevtushenko. No one could believe that the great leader was not immortal.
Трудящиеся столицы шли в колонный зал для великого прощания с гениальным вождем и учителем трудящихся Иосифом Виссарионовичем Сталиным.
I was here, and I remember very well everything what happens March 5th, 1953. All my childhood was under the Stalin's dictatorship, so that's, do I want or not, that's part of my life. So that's why I think Stalin, unfortunately, is still alive. So that's what we're trying with our film, to bury him forever.
Stalin's shadow still demands blood. In the basement of the Supreme Soviet, deputies seek the causes of nationalist violence. But the empire is just falling apart.
Ведь вопрос уже стоял на первом съезде. Проблема НК – это уже фактически была проблема и Азербайджана, и Армении. И только тупари в грубом этом понятии, именно так, не могли понять существо. Но они это понимали. Они, наоборот, накручивали момент.
And why, despite the enormous quantity of criticism, does nothing change, except that the air gets hotter?
Верховный Совет сегодня, когда мы не время главном. Мы говорили, что собираем пленум ЦК. Мы думали, что на пленуме ЦК наконец кто-то будет что-то говорить. Что это за президент страны, который дилетантское выступление делает?
Behind the scenes, the KGB go about their daily business, carrying the tools of their trade. Not many visitors to the Kremlin know what actually goes on in the Trinity Tower. The Kremlin regiment have set up their own orchestra. Lenin loved music, so the KGB too love the classics. Will the KGB stay true to their traditions? The Grand Kremlin Palace stands tall and proud. The parade staircase has been trodden both by Tsars and by Soviet political leaders. It was here that Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, was greeted on his way to receive an award in the magnificent St. George's Hall. Gagarin received from Leonid Brezhnev the highest Soviet honor, Hero of the Soviet Union. In the past, the Order of St. George was awarded to Russia's military heroes. The St. George's Hall and the neighboring St. Vladimir Hall have witnessed few ceremonies in this last year. Few mortals get to see their glories. The great rooms of the Kremlin Palace are frequented only by their curators.
Вот мы как раз находимся сейчас на фоне фрески, где изображен Федор Иоаннович, последний царь династии Романовых. Рядом с ним Борис Годунов. Грановитая палата, в которой мы находимся, это приемная зала великих государей. Построена была еще в XV веке для царя, великого князя Ивана III. И с тех пор, в общем-то, она всегда являлась приемной, парадной залой государей. Именно здесь президент, тогда еще глава государства Михаил Сергеевич Горбачев, принимал Рональда Рейгана.
These halls are slumbering. Nowadays, there's nothing much to celebrate.
This is the accepted image of the May Day parade, orderly ranks of the party faithful filing through Red Square under the benevolent gaze of their leader. But for Mikhail Gorbachev today, things went horribly wrong. Waiting their turn to enter the square, radicals marching under the banner of a red flag with the hammer and sickle torn out. But Mr. Gorbachev held his ground, drumming his fingers in frustration as they streamed past him to shout their disapproval. There were cries of shame, shame, and Politburo, get out. The Kremlin leaders eventually turned their backs, departing to catcalls and shouts of resign.
Олицетворение нашей страны. Красная площадь, это значит, это наша страна. Это наша жизнь. Святыня. И когда здесь проходят вот эти хулиганы, мы говорим, да как же можно издеваться над нашей Родиной? Вот мы об этом и говорим.
The tomb of the unknown soldier is beneath the Kremlin wall. We must try and understand this generation. Their cherished decorations, their victories, the deaths of their comrades in arms. They have to believe that these were not in vain. Today's cadets have no such past, yet they behave like their forefathers, coming to the Kremlin for their graduation day, to the Kremlin as the symbol of military power and authority. The Kremlin has another face, mystic and magical.
It symbolized Russia to me. Any ideas that I had about Russia automatically were centralized in the Kremlin. And when you travel, you see things as they really are, and photos and movies or anything never do justice to what you can see with your own eye, and this is incredible.
But only a small part of the Kremlin is seen by tourists. The most beautiful rooms are hidden from public view. One forbidden corner is the exquisite Tserim Palace. Built in the 17th century, it was the private quarters of the Tsars. According to the official line, Lenin ordered the conservation of the Kremlin's historic buildings. A special government commission initiated a truly scientific approach to the restoration of monuments.
Здесь располагались красивейшие монастыри и соборы, которые не сохранились до нашего времени. Только старые фотографии изображают их. Вот вся эта площадь была застроена старинными церквями и монастырями.
Among the buildings destroyed were the Monastery of the Holy Miracle, the Church of St. Catherine, and the 14th century Church of the Savior in the Wood. For the first time since the revolution, church bells ring again over Cathedral Square. The Kremlin authorities have allowed a service to take place. The servants of God, banished by the Bolsheviks, have been allowed to return. and the new Patriarch Alexei celebrates the liturgy. For centuries, the Kremlin was the center of the Russian Orthodox Church. In earlier times, the Patriarch himself resided here, but his palace is now a museum. Yet the Cathedral of the Assumption has not been returned to the church. It's been loaned for the occasion. The procession leaves through the Trinity Gate. Blink and you could be back in pre-revolutionary days. And look, some of the faithful are carrying, like the icon of a martyr, the portrait of the last Tsar, Nicholas II, assassinated with his family by the Bolsheviks. The great-great-niece of Nicholas II arrives at the Kremlin. The Princess Royal is the first member of the British royal family to make a state visit here. In the Armory Museum, Princess Anne is shown the royal treasury of her distant relatives, the throne of Catherine the Great and the sable-edged crowns of the Tsars. In 1913, Nicholas and Alexandra came to the Kremlin to celebrate the 300th jubilee of the Romanov dynasty. The The Russian imperial family was once closely linked to the royal houses of Europe. Can we ever restore these close links?
Idea to make special Easter eggs.
European craftsmen like Fabergé became famous for their work at the Russian court.
Jewelry, silver, gold, etc. And inside there was kind of special dress.
The museum has a fine collection of English silver, soon to be exhibited in London.
This was made in 1600 or 1601, and this one was made in 1604 and belonged to James I.
How important would you say they are in terms of English history? Or silver?
Immensely important, and as far as English silver is concerned, they're two of the grandest pieces from the period. There are no other things like this in the world.
So they really will be sensational when they come to
Oh, yes, they're wonderful things. I mean, not only from the point of view of design, but the workmanship, everything you can think about.
The weight is quite incredible. How much does it weigh?
Each one weighs 900 ounces.
In the past, the tables of the Kremlin buckled under the weight of sumptuous banquets. Now, they're no longer under that threat.
It is said, and correctly, that there has been no such visit to our country since the time of the Romanovs. Once again, we are delighted that you are with us, Your Royal Highness, and may I propose a toast to Her Majesty, the Queen.
Queen.
Where has all the food in the country gone? It wasn't the Tsars that ate it all. Russia used to provide half of the world with grain. Now it can't even feed its own politicians properly. Though, for the delegates, lunch in the buffet of the Supreme Soviet is better than trying to eat outside. In the lobby, there's been a special delivery of much sought-after books. An English dictionary, the memoirs of Boris Yeltsin, and this one, Grow Your Own Food. Nearly every day, another head of state makes a visit to meet the Soviet leaders, and the press is ushered in for yet another photo opportunity. Today, it's the turn of the Bulgarian Prime Minister to be greeted by Nikolai Ryzhkov. For years, Bulgaria has supplied the Soviet Union with tomatoes. Will there be any tomatoes tomorrow? Boris Yeltsin is now president of the Russian parliament. He has a simple solution to the government's problems.
Сначала, раз ты провалил одну программу, то ты должен уйти в отставку, а потом уже новое правительство представит другую программу.
This is the hall where, in earlier years, government votes were always unanimous. Today, will there be a landslide for the General Secretary at the party Congress? The press, at least, can't wait to find out. Will he be re-elected? Will his policies be adopted? Will the Communist Party give away any of its power? Will the radicals split the party? Could this be the party's last waltz? Poor party bureaucrats. It'll be a hard day for them. They'll have to make up their own minds.
His own speech lasted nearly 2.5 hours. The message, if reforms were blocked, the country would face dark times. And he attacked those who blamed his perestroika program for current ills. the response to his speech was decidedly tepid.
The delegates have an insoluble problem. They don't want to vote for, and they don't know how to vote against. Protected by the KGB and guarded by the army, the masters of the Kremlin seem unaware that to many of their people, they and their fortress are no longer frightening. Even the Savior Tower can be cut down to size. Meanwhile, the queue to the mausoleum is getting shorter.
Почему вы сюда пришли?
Посмотреть Владимира Ленина.
А что значит посмотреть? Что для вас Ленин, мавзолей?
Дороже всего на свете.
Спасибо.
Это самое дорогое. Для нас это самое дорогое. И мы никогда его не променяем, ни на кого.
Вы
все-таки не пошли по-ленински, а он нисколько не виноват.
А как вы относитесь вот к предложению, которое звучало, похоронить его?
Я не знаю, зачем это все нужно. Если бы он был жив, совсем бы другое дело было. Даже нет, не так бы жил.
Это святые святых для меня. Это наш вождь, наш учитель. Хотя это слова и, как говорится, ну, для других может звучит, а для меня это звучит от души, от сердца. Я верю ему.
Ну, конечно, мне обидно, что так сейчас к нему такое отношение. Вы знаете, такое сочувствие, недоумение в какой-то мере.
А вы считаете, что он должен вот так продолжать оставаться в мавзолее? Или, может быть, вот есть предложение его похоронить?
Ну, здесь мнения разные, но в основном самый должен быть захоронен.
Вы так считаете?
Считаю, что да. Это просто христианские обычаи.
Обязательно.
Обязательно. В обязательном порядке.
Только после похорон здесь будет идти на улучшение.
Why is this queue longer than the queue at the mausoleum?
Дело в том, что сейчас такое время, что люди просто потеряли всякое уважение, может быть, к прошлому. И просто, наверное, свой желудок дороже, чем память о прошлом.
Наверное, что-то было сделано не так, и поэтому очередь там меньше, чем очередь здесь.
Я думаю, что Ленина пора выносить. Просто-напросто.
Да. Это действительно так.
У меня убит сын сотрудниками МВД и КГБ. Действовала государственная банда до убийства. Сбили у меня сына, добили, все изъяли. Вот это, что наклеила, я принесла, куда я обращалась. Это еще у меня только половина. Половина у меня у соседей. Обращалась во все органы. Была сидела у дома Горбачева.
The people have found a hero. Yeltsin has left the party, and today he's left the Kremlin. The people follow him, but where will he lead them? And do those who walk the corridors of power really care? The Oval Hall in the Senate building is where the Council of Ministers meet under the watchful gaze of Lenin. All bureaucrats like things to be neat and tidy and to stay the way they are.
Я бы хотел, чтобы этот портрет висел всегда, потому что сейчас в процессе переоценки и нашего исторического прошлого очень многие силы в обществе впадают в крайности. Они занимают или крайне левые, или крайне правые позиции. И Ленину приписывают зачастую то, к чему он ни своим учением, ни своей практикой, ни всей своей жизнью не имел порой никакого отношения.
To whom then should the Kremlin belong? To President Gorbachev and his entourage? To the military? To the church? To the museums? To the tsars? Or maybe to the people, perhaps?
Убедился.
Не сразу оппозиционно. Спасибо большое.
Слова, что означает для вас лично Кремль сам?
Кремль – это наша история, это самое главное в каждом из нас. Это судьба наша, поэтому святое место.
И за это хорошая политическая оценка для новой политической системы.
Хороший центр. Тут он и должен находиться. И я думаю, никуда его нельзя сдвинуть.
Спасибо вам.
Kremlin. To whom do you think you belong? We Russians have a saying. Above Russia is the Kremlin. Above the Kremlin are the heavens. Will Russia ever see the heavens?